Hi friends! If you're watching this, that means you have some interest in seeing my video logging of my training for Ute 100 and the Bear 100. The Bear is actually my primary target race for this year, and Ute is something that I signed up for because a bunch of my friends had signed up for it. So that's how you get pulled into these kinds of things. But the video logging is something new. I've not ever done this before, and I have been listening to some of the Trail Currents podcasts by Jamil Curry and Jubilee Page, and they did one that talked about doing your first 100-miler, and they were talking about various ways that you could train, and Jubilee was talking a bit about her plans and her training. And Jamil talked a bit about his first experiences. And I thought it might be kind of fun to go ahead and do a video log. Now, this won't be my first 100-miler. I have actually completed a couple of 100-milers, but neither of them were mountain hundreds. So the mountain hundred still eludes me. I have started the Bear 2 different times now, and both times I DNF'd. I'm sure in part because my preparation was not sufficient, but also in part because the weather was fairly challenging both years. In fact, the weather was so bad. The last year I attempted it, which was in 2016, that they couldn't even run the regular course. They actually had the course was changed to be an out and back to Tony Grove because there was so much snow up in the sections where the course went through for the second half that they couldn't even expect to get volunteers to the aid stations there. So obviously there were people that finished, so it was definitely a doable race, but it was not doable by me that year with the conditioning that I had. This year I am trying to prepare a little bit better, and in particular, I'm focusing a bit more on ascent. I really want to make sure I get enough climbing in so that I'm ready for the really long climbs and the long downhills, and that I don't get tired sooner than I ought to. The other thing I've been doing this year, which is not so much a training issue, but a researching and acquiring what I think may be better gear so that I can have a jacket that will still keep me warm even if it gets a bit wet, so that I have a hat in case it's very, very cold. I mean, I've always had hats, but I have one now that is particularly for the kind of conditions we had in 2016. I've not even tested it because I haven't had any weather that's been that cold, that wet, where I would have needed that jacket. So I'm doing a few things differently, and my goal with doing this video logging would be to talk a little bit about the things that I am trying to do, like trying to get in a certain amount of scent for a particular week. So not necessarily every week. It's a little bit hard to get a lot of ascent right where I live unless I do the same set of trails over and over, which I'm not going to make my training boring and unenjoyable just to achieve that goal. But I am going to pay more attention to trying to hit some of those routes that are steeper and let me get in more ascent per mile. So one of the things that I have been tracking for quite some time is the concept of ascent per mile. So I look at the total ascent for my run, and then I divide that by the number of miles of the run, and I come up with an average rate of ascent per mile. So this lets me compare different training routes that I do, compare their average steepness. Now, obviously in some places the ascent is quite a lot higher than that, and then in other places it's flatter. But this just gives me a single number that I can use to help me compare one run to another, which I find useful. My typical routes, if I'm not looking particularly to get ascent, tend to range in the probably about 100 to 110 feet per mile on average. If I specifically try to hit a number of the higher points around here, then I'll probably come up in the 130 to maybe even as high as 150 range. And then there are a few key trails, but just a handful where I can get numbers that are up closer to 180 to 200 feet per mile on average. Now, Ute has 18,000 feet of ascent, so that's an average, assuming it's about 100 miles, that's an average of 180 per mile. And the Bear is 22,000 feet of ascent, so that's 220 feet per mile, which is more than almost any of the routes that I get here have. So one thing I've been doing recently, as the snow and ice has receded from the rims of the Grand Canyon, is I have been trying to get down or get up to the Grand Canyon once a week, so that I can get in some very sustained descent and climbing. And I think that's starting to pay dividends. I've only done it a few weeks now. We had some other things. We had some travel to New Zealand, which meant that I didn't go those weeks, although we stayed in Queensland. And many of the trails in Queensland pretty much go straight up the hillsides away from the lake. So I had plenty of steep, mostly hiking there, but some running and some hiking. And so that was good. So I've been to the Grand Canyon 3 times. I did manage to check off a bucket list item, which is this year I did my first rim to rim to rim, which is crossing the Grand Canyon twice. So I went down South Kaibab Trail, crossed the Colorado River on the Black Bridge, and then went up North Kaibab to the rim. Took some photos, grabbed some snow, actually put some snow in my bandana to help me keep cool, because the temperature difference from the rim down to the river area is quite a large temperature difference. So even though it was still very pleasant and cool at the North Rim, it was quite a bit hotter lower down. And then I went back up South Kaibab. There's no water on the South Kaibab Trail, so you do have to be able to carry all of the water that you need from the last water area, which is near Phantom Ranch. So it's down by the Colorado River. The day I did it, while it was certainly warm down low, it wasn't excessively hot, and I don't drink a ton of water, so I had no problems with carrying the amount of water that I needed. So that's been my recent focus, is to try to get a lot of ascent, and not at the moment being very focused on pace, but just trying to get ascent and time on feet. And then the time on feet translates to getting a certain amount of mileage. Obviously on my steeper routes I don't get as much mileage because I go slower, but that's my plan at the moment. So I am going to include in my vlogging, I'll probably take the camera with me and get some video of some of the trails. I won't do that every time, but I'll do that on some of the runs where I think that might be interesting. And then I'll have other comments about how the training is going as I go along, and just kind of document this journey. Hopefully some of you guys will find that interesting. So join me on the trails. Okay, here I am, my starting location for today's run. The point of the run today is to try to get a lot of ascent, and I don't really care about pace, and I don't particularly care about mileage, but I will track that. And it's about 20 minutes before dawn, before sunrise. That is when I like to start if I can, because as a slower runner, that lets me get in more distance before the day gets very late, and that lets me spend time with my family. And I also just feel better when I get more distance done earlier in the day. So that's why I start early. And we can just start to see hints of the sunrise coming. So let me see if I can show that. So here's the pretty dawn color, just starting to come through the trees here. And I'm gonna go ahead and get started on my run here pretty soon. All right, so coming up to the first high point of the climb. Let's see, about 1,100 feet of ascent total so far. Obviously a little bit less than that net. And really nice views up here as I come out to this ridge. I like this ridge here because you can just get a huge view down into Skull Valley on the other side, which is really pretty. And I'm going to be running down in that direction. So headed downhill now. Okay, here we are, approaching the turn to the Hotshots tree. So it's this little path. We've just come down this wash area, and then the turn is pretty close after that. And this is the tree that the Granite Mtn Hotshots saved from the Dosi fire. It's a very old, very large tree, and unfortunately, not too long after that, we lost our nearly entire Hotshots crew in the Yarnell fire. So people decided to make this huge juniper tree a memorial tree. So locals call it the Hotshots tree. So I'm not going to stand here and read the whole plaque, but it's it talks about this. And people have put all kinds of, there's a 19 flags, flowers, headlamp, firefighter symbols. They're just all kinds of memorial items to pay tribute to our firefighters. It was a devastating loss for the community. You can't talk to anybody here that doesn't know somebody whose family was affected by this. So I thought I would make a stop by this tree, just because it is very, very impressive. Let's see if I can give you some perspective on how large the tree is. You can see it up there behind me. So, all right, I'm going to get back on the trail. I am now headed to Blair Pass, which is the saddle that sits between Granite Mountain and Little Granite Mountain. So kind of tucked up in that direction. All right, I'm starting up my out and back on the Granite Mountain Lookout Trail. Just came through Blair Pass, but that's not quite as scenic as sort of coming up this first bit of the trail. So thought I'd kind of pan around. This is the pass area right there. And as you climb up, that direction over there is the west side, which is where I came up from just a few minutes ago. Kind of follows this drainage area for the last bit. And this is a good trail to get some climb on. You can see it going to be headed up in that direction up there. And later on I'll pull the camera back out and show you some of the views from higher up. Just wanted to kind of show the saddle area between Granite Mountain and Little Granite Mountain. It's actually very pretty today. All right, partway up the climb here, we going to turn away from the climb a little bit in a minute, so I wanted to be able to get a nice shot looking down the mountain. And then saddle's actually not too far up ahead, but I think you can't see quite as much down the mountain as you can on some of the sections of this bit of the trail. I always find it satisfying to look back where I've come from. I like, feeling that sense of accomplishment. So, looking down the ravine, down towards that saddle area. That's it for now. All right, I'm up at the saddle on Granite Mountain. So not the saddle for Blair Pass, but really nice views towards the Williamson Valley area here. Very pretty. Little windy in the pass, but it's warm enough. It's not a big deal. And that's one side. There's the trail I just came up, right past that rock there. And I stepped out of the trail a little bit so I could go get you that view off over to the other side, the opposite side from where I've been climbing up. Now I'm continuing on, and we look back down this direction. That's the direction that I came up from. So continuing on up. So this is a section I just love on this trail. Unlike the other areas that are all about the distance views, this is this neat little pocket valley on the shoulder of the mountain. And you drop in on this trail that comes from that gap there. And you kind of drop down into a very shallow little basin area, which has a bunch of trees and this really nice sandy trail, which normally I'd be running, but I wanted to video this. And really nice views of the rest of the mountain around you. And the wind is a lot less down here. I mean, sometimes when I'm walking, it probably still sounds pretty windy. But I came in here earlier in the season when there was still snow on the ground, and yet with the sunlight in here and the bit of shelter, it was actually really warm. It was really pleasant and beautiful. So just wanted everybody to have a chance to see this really neat valley area. I'm at the lookout area. This is as far as I'm going. This is a little trail that kind of winds around below this set of rocks. It is not the highest point on Granite Mountain, but it is the one that the main trail tends to take you to. So, yeah, nice view of Granite Basin Lake down there, and also got a view in the distance of, I think that's Watson Lake, with the trees greening up around it, and the dells. Just really pretty. It's a little hazy today. That doesn't stop me from enjoying the views. And then of course this is the side I came up on over here. Walk down a little bit. Try to show where I've come from and where I'm going. Get a little closer to this side of the mountain, it'll be easier to see. My watch says I'm now 13 miles into it. So down there is Blair Pass, and I came up, not actually from the most visible trail there, that's a different trail, but I came up a trail that's down a drainage that goes this way. And when I come back to Blair Pass, I'm actually going to turn left, and I'm going to go down the drainage on this side. And then I'll actually climb back up to the ridge, probably in that tree area there. It's a little bit hard to tell from here. This side of the hill that has all of the switchback roads on it. So between here and there, I'll be making another climb back up to the shoulder of Two Rock Mountain. So this is Little Granite Mountain here, and that's Two Rock Mountain. And I think I climb up between those two, if I remember correctly. So, all right, well, I'm gonna get rolling again. All right, I'm headed up Clear Creek Trail number 40. I just, a little while back, finished the descent into Granite Basin. And now I'm starting my last sustained climb of today, which will take me back up between Two Rock Mountain and Little Granite. So I actually like this trail both for downhill and for uphill because there's not a lot of big rock on it. So it's very runnable downhill. For me, it's not runnable uphill. It is a good climb. It's got a pretty steep grade for me. I would not be able to run this. But the other thing I like about this trail is that this first bit is kind of open on a ridge, and so you have these nice views over the basin forest, which are really cool. That's Granite Mountain on the left. And then as I get further up here, I'll actually get into the shade more, which is, you know, nice when the temperatures are starting to climb a little bit and you want to have a little break from the sun, assuming you're not doing heat training. So this is just generally a nice trail. Another view out here through this gap of that forest area. It's very pretty. All right, I'm gonna keep working. All right, I wanted to show some of this Clear Creek Trail number 40 in the more treed section. So have, bits and pieces of shade here. It's currently 10:51, so the sun's getting pretty much overhead. So there are still a number of sunny sections on the trail, but it is cooler here. And if we'd had some rain, Clear Creek is right down there, parallels this trail, but there is not any water in it right now. But I still find this section to be really beautiful. I love the trees. I love a little bit of shade. When I do this trail earlier in the morning, there's a lot of bird song, which is nice. And in the fall, some of these trees off here to the right will turn pretty colors. Right now we're in spring, so they're just greening up, which is also very pretty. That creek bed area has those deciduous trees. And again, you can see this is a really nice packed sand trail. So just awesome for running down and pretty uncomplicated for hiking upward. All right, and I got a little downhill, so I'm gonna run this. Always good to make a little bit of time where I can. Well, it makes for a lousy video. No image stabilization here. All right, there you go. All right, well, I'm back home. I'm clean. Before I actually got my shower, the first thing I did when I got back to my car at the end of the run was I had chocolate milk, which I like to use as a recovery drink. And I also, normally I would have a banana. I didn't have any bananas, so this time I had some yogurt instead. But the chocolate milk lets you get some protein, lets you get your blood sugar back up, and then I usually go home or I go out for lunch depending on what I'm doing. And if I'm done by regular lunchtime, I'll usually meet up with my husband for lunch. And if I'm not done by that time, I'll have, if it's like just a bit after lunch, I'll go ahead and have a lunch. And if it's really close to dinner, I'll just have a snack and then have dinner later. But my general idea is that I want to go ahead and refuel right after my run. That's just what I do. As I said, today's run was all about ascent, and I ended up with somewhere in the range of 4,400, maybe closer to 4,500, with elevation corrections enabled. It was 4,489. Got my dogs here. My dogs are making noise. Come here. This is my little dog. This is Loki, and he's easy to pick up and show to the camera. And my other dog is a border collie, and she thinks because we're out here on the deck that I am going to play fetch with her. So she's making some noise. At any rate, so the things I'm trying to do in this training session are get a lot of ascent, try not to focus too much on pace, but then also just get good time on feet. And I do want to get the miles. I'm not saying the miles aren't important, but right now, because I have not yet completed a mountain 100, I really want to make sure that I get enough ascent to where I'm prepared for that. So the two 100s that I'm signed up for this summer, the Ute 100 is 18,000 feet of ascent, and the Bear 100 is, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22,000 feet of ascent. So ascent is fairly important. And try not to start too fast. That's something that I've noticed, especially if I'm doing a run with a lot of elevation gain, or I'm doing just an all-day run. If I just take the first 2 miles easy and really don't strain, it makes the whole rest of the run way better. I've really learned to value that. Now, that doesn't mean I don't sometimes still do the wrong thing. Today, I think I actually did start just a little bit fast. It was 37 degrees at the start, and then I knew the temperatures were going to get up to the 70 degree and sunny range, and so I was wearing short sleeves, I was wearing a skirt, and so even with a jacket on and an earband on, I was a little cold at the start, so I probably pushed the pace a little bit more than I needed to. Trying to think of what else. I think that's really kind of it for today's run. I think it went well. Oh, I know what else I was going to say. So I actually have a race, Whiskey Basin 88K, this weekend. And today is Monday, and I still went out and did, ended up being 24.4 miles with 4,400 plus feet of ascent. But I did it very easily, so I didn't overtax myself. And that's obviously the case. I'm not tapering for Whiskey Basin 88K. Actually, it was always on my schedule as a planned long training run. Just because of the cutoffs and because I'm not very fast, I can't just completely relax and take it easy for that run. I will have to go a little bit faster than I probably would on a normal all-day training outing. However, I won't have to carry as much water as I would normally do. So today, and I actually don't drink a lot compared to some people. I took 60 ounces, and that was enough for me to do my whole loop, which again, I'm not very fast, and I can't remember exactly what the total time for the loop was, but it was past lunchtime. So it takes me a little while. Of course, I started at dawn. So I want to say it was, I'll have to look it up. At any rate, but I have a lot of events that I like to do because they're ones that I like to see the people, I like to see the course. And it's really important if you're going to do a lot of events that you don't race all of those events. You know, you do them at, I think ideally if you're doing a lot of them, you're doing them at training effort, not even beyond training effort. And in my case, sometimes to make cutoffs, I'm having to do them a bit harder than training effort. And as long as I plan for that, I think that's okay. So this week, my plan was to do kind of a long run today with some good ascent. Tomorrow, I would like to still get some good ascent on Tuesday, but not go as many miles. So my total ascent will be less, but per mile, I'd like to see a fair bit of ascent. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'll probably make all those runs be fairly short and more flat. I mean, they probably won't be completely flat because I don't do a lot of flat trails around here, but they'll be more flat so that I will have enough reserves so that I can make the cutoffs for the Whiskey Basin 88K. And I'm looking forward to that. It's actually a circle. It's a trail that forms a circle all the way around Prescott. And so it's called the Prescott Circle Trail. And I can see portions of the trail from my house. Let me see if I can actually point this out here. So that mountain right there, there is a very faint line below the P. The P, of course, standing for Prescott. And that is part of the Prescott Circle Trail. Actually, that's towards the end of the Whiskey 88 Basin. Whiskey 88K. And then the rock formations out beyond this subdivision here, those are called the dells. And the trail runs this side of those dells. Those dells are down by Willow Lake, which you can't really see from here. But the trail goes past there. So basically our start and finish area is almost right through that hill at Watson Lake. Another lake you can't quite see from here, but it's right over in that direction. And so the trail up on P Mountain over here, that's towards the end of the Circle Trail as you're finishing towards Watson Lake. And then the trail that runs this side of that rocky area over there, that's actually very near to the start of the race. And I think that's it for now. I hope you have a good training week and work steadily to accomplish your goals.